Welcome back and welcome to lesson 14 in the Houdini Environment Beginner Series. We're going to continue where we left off and actually now set up our stage layout for bringing in all of these models we've created in the last few lessons. So we modeled the podium, and I'll walk you through really quickly here. The base podium here, some edge rocks. We graphed these in on the branches, and we'll go through node by node, but I just want to show you really quickly. The dirt we're actually going to cover as the main ground for the dirt. So this bottom here is just for shadows. The environment, we'll actually fix this issue later. It looks like somewhere during the lessons my geometry ground got transformed a little bit. So we'll debug and see exactly what this little artifact is that's causing this. Then we bring in our houses, which we did actually arrange. And we added a new house, this little slanted house, in the last lesson when we were modeling and walking through the prep for our Solaris geometry. And then here we have our towers, which you can actually see are now intersecting the houses because we've moved those. So we'll also cover how to adjust these towers and how to place them in a position that's not intersecting the houses, and then also how to have our scattering set up for the rest of those not affect the towers or the house locations incorrectly. So we'll get up to here, this purple line, which is this section up here for our lesson 14. So to start, I'm going to go up here to our primitive. And if we remember from our lesson 1 in the beginner series for Houdini, which I do encourage you to check out if you haven't yet, we'll see our primitive paths are defined up here, and we are using these essentially as folders. So here in our scene graph path, which is our geometry spreadsheet, or if we do new pane type, Solaris, it is our scene graph tree. So Houdini and side effects, they know that when we're in the context of Solaris and stage, we want to look at our scene graph path and not our spreadsheet. So this panel will switch back and forth between the two as we navigate. So here we define primitives for our lighting, our assets, props, heroes, environment, podium, and then materials as well. And this we've all covered before. And then this graph, this null could actually be removed, but this was just for organization and to stay consistent with our beginner series lesson 1. Next up, we've got this graphed branches, which we have learned about before. We take the primitives here we'd like to graft, which is everything on this right side. And then we take the location where we'd like to place those into our scene graph path, which here is assets/podium. And you can see that adds these two primitives here onto this podium primitive here in our scene graph path. And then these here, and I'll actually show you this issue right now we're about to get with the dirt. These are our SOP imports, which are being fetched from a different area in Houdini, and we can jump to where that is, which is this one here. So if I go up to the object context, I can now see all these containers that we've been working in for the last few lessons. And inside modeling part 4, lesson 6, we have podium geometry modeling. And then I'll actually show you the issue we were getting in stage here really quick. So I'm going to go U, jump back into our LOP network, which we've also covered, is how we are working in Solaris. And the issue we're actually going to be running into now is it looks like our dirt ground is intersecting the shadow catcher here. And the shadow catcher, I just wanted so no accidental light spills come through the cracks or from the HDRIs that we'll actually add, looks like in lesson 15, and in the next lesson we'll get to lighting. But we want to have this not intersect our ground. And the way we could fix that is we could transform the ground up here in our stage context. So we go to the dirt ground. We go here onto our transform. And I'm going to control click to arrange it, give us a little more space. And we can type our dirt ground primitive. And if we wanted to translate that upwards, we could middle mouse button and drag it up. And then select down here on this transform. And now this is moving our ground upwards. So if we did this just a little bit, maybe on this transform we set it to 0.2, it looks like that fixes the issue here. but then creates another issue. So that is one option. I'm actually going to delete that because I want to make that transform not in our stage context here, but I want to do that in our geometry context. So before I actually merge our dirt into our stage, I want to have that in its correct location. And the way I'm going to fix that is go U to go up, and I'm going to navigate back into here. And then here I've just created this merge to see all these three objects here, which are the three podium parts that we are bringing into stage. I merge those to C, and now we can see exactly what's going on. This shadow catcher is intersecting with our other geometry. Now to fix that, what I'll just do, I'll just bring a transform. I'm going to move that down a little bit here. And then it looks like we could also make our bricks a little bit taller so it matches. And the way I'm going to do that is, if you remember from the modeling lesson of the bricks, we can actually change it on this box right here. And I could even disable that. And it looks like the issue from that might have just been the change we had made during the modeling lesson, which was lesson 7, and when I showcased the blocks, themselves and how they were combined. Remember this block here, copy to points, and that is being merged all the way here, down this side of the graph. So space G to frame, and we could change the size of this block if we did want to. And actually the reason this did intersect was because when I was referencing the size of the block for our resample here, I was referencing this scale rather than this size. So the correct way for me to have changed that would be to drag this side here, and then you'll see it can scale the box without intersecting the other geometry. So I'm going to Control Z to undo. And now we have that intersection fixed from our objects. Now U to go up, and I'm going to jump back into our stage context, which is right here, and then we'll keep going. So this, remember, this was a save path with USD, this exclamation mark here. And the way I can fix that, since we're not actually saving USD assets to disk, I can just hit Control S, and that will remove that warning for me. So we bring in our podium, we bind it or import it as this path prefix for $OS, which will save it as podium shadow catcher. So if we change the name of this node, it would update that name in our scene graph path. And then podium edge rocks, we just fetch that exact null. And then this again is a relative path. So when we select here on our podium edge rocks, this is the location in our Houdini scene where this file is. I can hit accept, and if I want a relative path or not an absolute path, but we're going to stick with relative. So I'm going to keep export relative path checked. Then we merge them together, and then we graphed our branches, which is move everything from this source prim onto this primitive here. And I'll show you once here. That is this graph branches node here. And I want to say, okay, take everything here on the right, and where do I want to put it? I want to put it on this podium primitive here. So I can drag and drop, and there we go. I want to delete that because this node here does that exact same thing. Awesome. So we'll keep going. Next up, we have the dirt, which you did notice, actually you do notice, it's a little bit subdivided here because we did that dicing in our object context or geometry context. And then this node here is a naming node I've done. This doesn't need to be connected, but this is actually later used to fetch the object and then bring it back into modifying it further inside this network here. So we'll get to these later. And this is the similar thing we did for the fire effect setup, where we placed our blocks, our wooden blocks of fire, and then we imported those into the geometry context back again to simulate in Houdini, or not in Houdini, excuse me. We simulated with Axiom, but we did use Houdini. This render geometry setting, we did actually cover on our material lesson. And what this is being used for is to set the dirt ground primitive and everything under the dirt ground primitive I've done. So I can add a wildcard here. And I was using this to set, I believe, no displacement. Okay, so what I did want to do is I wanted to remove the dicing. So I set that to a very, very small amount. And if you remember from our material lesson, the dicing is the settings that Houdini will use to further subdivide and increase the resolution of this geometry at render time for it to then be displaced. And the reason it is a very, very small number and not 0, because 0 seems to have actually disabled the displacement. But what I want is I want to enable displacement, but just not have Houdini add any resolution. Which again, we've covered in our material lesson, so I do encourage you to check that out. Next up, we do a merge, which technically is not needed, but I thought maybe in the future we would have more SOP imports here for maybe other parts of the ground. Graph branches, everything here onto our environment primitive. And then we continue. Next up, we've got the houses, which if I jump to this little arrow, it'll show me where they are. And we could actually set this to a relative path. We probably should set it to a relative path. So I just updated that by checking the export relative path option. And we'll jump to see where we're bringing this in from. And it is our house modeling setup. And if you remember, we actually added, I believe it was this house 4 on the last lesson, and then we translated this. We transformed it to move it here. And then we replaced it so it fit back in the middle of our podium. And then this house out, if I do Control C, and then go back, that is actually the null that is being fetched here from SOPs. Next up, we've got a null here again, which the same thing I'm doing with this ground. I'm using this null as a target that I can later reference and bring into these instancer nodes here, which if we jump inside are just ways we can work with geometry context to create these points that we're going to scatter our objects onto. So I see I bring in the ground, I bring in the buildings, which was that fetch dirt ground. Well, fetch dirt ground here is because I click this node. If I click import buildings, it'll show me fetch house, and import towers, it'll show me fetch tower. If I U to go up, and that is these nodes here, fetch tower and fetch house. Awesome. And then what we can actually do now is these are merged back in here with assets / hero as our podium, or as our primitive that we've decided to do. And then next up, we've got our towers. And now what we want to do is we want to actually fix these towers so they're not intersecting with our houses when we merge those in later. And the way we're actually going to fix that, we could transform those here. But if we do transform here, what we'll have is we'll have all of these objects moving together, and we don't want that. So the way we could do this is to either split these objects up so they're all individual primitives, or we could move them in SOPs in our geometry context. So let's jump into there and we'll decide on how to set that up. So the easiest way to actually do it would probably be right here. And in order for us to see what we're actually looking at, we'll want to figure out a way to get our house models referenced here and visible in this area. So the way I'll choose to do that, and then I'll actually show you a different way to do it as well. I'm going to go into my house geometry prep. I'm going to Control C to copy this null. And then I'm going to go into tower geometry prep. And I'm going to do an object merge. I'm going to template this, and I'm going to paste the null of our house. And there we go. We get our houses. And the reason we can do this actually is because in our stage context, we import those houses in here and we leave them at the exact same world location as they are in the geometry context. So if we were moving those houses here, then we would want to have this transform updated into our tower setup. But since we're not moving those here, it is fine to actually reference the houses from the geometry context instead of from stage. So we're fetching it from here. And we're bringing it into here. And I'm going to template that, template these, and then what we can just do is select these transforms, hit enter, and move them around. And I'll leave this one here. And then I'll show you another way we can actually do that. Looks like these are very close to each other. So template again our houses, control click, and I can template these as well. And then maybe we'll put this tower over on this side. And I'm clicking this little green rectangle, and that lets me move in the X and the Z without moving in the Y. And there we go. And now if I hit U to go up and back into our stage layout, we'll see that our towers are now respecting those new positions. And now say we wanted to move this tower, but we wanted to move that tower in stage and maybe adjust it here while we see everything else. If we did try to do that, if I add a transform and tried to select this object, you'll notice that these are all connected together. So if I click here to hide and show, these objects are all under the same primitives, so there's no easy way for us to access this individual tower. And we could do some other things to fix it, but the way I'll choose to fix that now is I want to have these towers all imported as unique primitives in our scene graph path. And the way to do that, or one of the ways to do that, is to go back to our towers. And what we want to do is we want to add a name attribute to each tower that is unique to itself and not to all the other towers. And the way we can do that would probably be best with, we could either use a name attribute here or a name a name node, which will actually create a new issue, and I'll show you that in a second. So if I go here and I type in name, and it's not here on point, so remember it's on primitives, we can see our name here. And now if we look at each different object, these names we're using as the materials. But what I might want to do is say, okay, let's bring in those names, but then let's append a tower ID. So maybe if we have this attribute tower number, and now I'm just doing a wildcard to see anything that has the name number, tower 1. All right, that's good. So maybe if we want to append tower number to tower name, that might fix our issue. The way we're going to do that is with a primitive wrangle. So we're just going to combine those two strings. So we're going to do s at name equals s at name plus s at tower number. All right, there we go. And let's add this as well. Let's add this little underscore in between. So there we go. We'll say append tower number to name. And now what we have is we have tower pole metal, tower 1, and then we have a tower number there. And if we copy by alt dragging this primitive wrangle to each of these numbers, or each of these towers actually, and then drag and drop it in here, what we'll see by the end is a whole collection of all these towers with their unique material names here and then the tower names here. So now if I go back up into our stage context, we'll see those all now have different setups here. So what I want to now do is I want to pick the setup here that has individual tower of this name right here. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to go through here and I'm going to try to figure out which one of these has the tower, and I can set that up by just actually doing tower. Now I need to pick which one. So let's go through and see which one. Looks like tower 3 is this tower right here. So I'm going to select everything that has the tower 3 name in it. We'll see if I can do that by this. Wildcard tower _ 3. Tower 3, tower 3, tower 3. And now if I try to transform this, we'll see, there we go. So now we're transforming any primitive that ends in the underscore tower _ 03. And we can preview this node down here at the bottom. And now we can move this individual object, this individual tower. And let's actually do this. Let's place it farther away. Because what we'll see later is now when we reference these towers to scatter our objects, since we're referencing this fetch tower node, this transform of moving it from here to here will be respected in our scattering. And I'll color this so then hopefully later when we're going through our setup for scattering, we can remember this and I can show you how that actually updates the transform of everything we're being placed. So render geometry settings, which I'm actually using, looks like to remove dicing. So I wanted to have no displacement at all, or no dicing at all on those objects. And then there we go. Now we've got our towers, correctly placed in our scene, and our house correctly placed as well. And now let's try to fix this issue of this block, this box intersecting the house. And the way we've done these right here with our SOP import. Okay, well, all right, well, I'm going to restart Houdini, and I'll be right back in a minute. Welcome back. Apologies for that. Houdini decided to crash, so we are now back, and it looks like we didn't lose anything. So always save, and actually a good thing probably to do would be to do a file save as. And then if you could do a incremental file save. So just increment your file number by 1, and then that works usually if Houdini sometimes does crash and your file gets corrupted. That is a very likely issue. Not very likely, but it does happen, and it has happened to me. So you wouldn't want to lose all your progress. So we're going to keep going. And what we had here was we had these prop boxes, which we created, and we fetched those from our box modeling. So props crate modeling. Looks like I spelled it wrong. I meant to say crate, but that'll be fine for now. And we have all these boxes that we had created. And then we actually had a new one, which was the box metal glow, or metal box glow, which if you remember correctly, we had now I'm seeing this one thing. So we'll see if we recache this and see if that'll change the box. So this was a thing we discussed actually earlier when we copied the base name and the base name of a box. I was testing to see if it would overwrite the other one, but it looks like the file cache node actually did have a setting built in where that would not be the case. So we have these nulls here, Control C, hit the back arrow to go back, and then we do a SOP import. We paste our node, and then we get our box imported here, and we've named this to our box. And then because of this $OS, this $operator string, the scene graph path primitive will be named the same as our node name. You see, changing this does change that path name. So we get the box and we transform it. And we do that for all of these. And there's other ways to place things in Solaris. We could actually save these out as assets and then load those back in with a Solaris layout asset gallery. But we're not going to do those yet. We're actually going to do that in most likely later courses, which will be a lot of fun. So the one we want to get rid of is this box here. So let's find out which box that was, which was this one here. So I'm going to color this green. Select the transform, whoops, and then hit enter, and then we'll be able to move this. And Solaris also does have layout tools for painting and scattering objects, but those we're not going to use yet, actually. We might save those for later once we create our own USD asset library, which will be a lot of fun. So there we go. We'll leave that as now for our props for these boxes. Merge those in. Then we graph the branches. And this is, again, moving slash source prim path onto asset props. And you can see right here under this primitive, all our props are here now, including the towers, actually. And those are all named individually. So we could add materials to each individual tower separately if we did want. But we're probably actually going to have to change the material assignments because I renamed these towers, and now we're going to have to update that in our materials. So we'll fix that issue once we get to it in lesson 17. So awesome. That's going to end this lesson right here for lesson 14. And then next up, we'll extend further in here, set up our lighting, and then figure out how to make this look a little bit more interesting. Because if we did a render right now, we'll let it think for a second. This doesn't quite look as good as it could. So lighting is the biggest thing probably to fix that. And then obviously materials, which we will get to later. So awesome. Thank you so much, and I will see you in the next video.